What's going on next, family? Pastor Preston with you for week 3 of our series Villains. I'm so excited to continue this series as we continue to learn from bad examples in the Bible what we shouldn't do and how we can reverse course and do the opposite. Last week we talked about Abel and Cain and how Cain's sacrifice and Cain's anger was his downfall. This week we're going to be looking at someone different. We're going to be looking at King Saul in the Old Testament. And so, have you ever heard the saying, don't judge a book by its cover? I always heard that growing up. I'm sure you still hear it from your parents today. Not to judge what you see on someone by the outside, but judge them based on what's inside, their character, their morals, what they stand for, etc., etc. And in life, I think we're the same way. You think about sports, or you think about talent shows like American Idol. We constantly root for the people who are underdogs, the people who don't look the part, who come up on stage and look like torn down old people who have no talent, but they end up blowing us away with their voice, or the underdog story of a team who comes back and beats the team that's been perfect or the team that's been great. And we love underdog stories. We love to root for people that don't fit the part. And in the story of the Bible in 1 Samuel, the book of 1 Samuel, we see that the people of God called the Israelites wanted a king. They wanted a king that would rule them and would fight against their enemies, that would create armies, that would lead them into prosperity. And who did the Israelites want? Well, they wanted this guy named Saul. Now, they wanted Saul for a variety of reasons, but the Bible describes Saul as this. They describe him as a super handsome dude. Said he's very handsome. It's almost weird how much they say he's handsome. And they say, hey ladies, listen, they say Saul is the tallest of everybody in Israel. He is tall. So obviously he's over 6 feet. If you're wondering, ladies, he is over 6 feet. And so he's tall, he's strong, he's handsome, and the Israelites desperately want him as their king, and they get him as their king because he's strong and they know that he'll fight and kill their enemies. However, he wasn't the right fit for Israel to be their king, as we see. Even though Saul looked the part, his character was terrible. He may have been great on the outside and looked like he'd be a great king, but on the inside he was a terrible king. And we see why. We see Saul's downfall starts when he gets prideful and arrogant and doesn't want to listen to what God's commanded him to do. So what God would do is if Israel were to destroy an enemy city, a town, an army, he would command them, whatever's left of that town, whether it's leftover food, leftover cattle, leftover homes, whatever's left over in that town, burn it. Don't take any of it. You don't take part in any of what they have or any of what they own. And so what Saul knew is that he was supposed to ban and he was supposed to destroy the spoils of his victory. However, what did Saul do? He took some things, he took some food, he took some things from the leftover places they had won victory over, and God rejected him for it. Now, before God rejected him, Samuel, who was a priest, or what you would consider a pastor today, had already come out and said, I don't want Saul to be the king. He's not right. I reject him as my king. I reject him as the king that God would want us to have. Now, it's one thing when man rejects us, right? When someone says, oh, so-and-so's not good, or oh, so-and-so's not the right fit, or so-and-so isn't the right leader, or even in sports you think about, oh, so-and-so's not the right quarterback or the right receiver. We always are rejecting people, but what's different is when God chooses to reject somebody, he will lead them down a path of destruction, and he will ultimately remove them from that position of power. And that's what happened when God said, I'm banning and I'm removing Saul. His life from here on out will be nothing but sorrow, and he will go and be removed from king. And that's what happened. God rejected Saul after Saul got arrogant, Saul got prideful, and he didn't want to listen to God's command. So what happened after Saul kind of went on the downturn? Well, God brought David into the picture. If you know who David is the one in the story of David and Goliath. David came in, it was anointed to take Saul's place when Saul was gone. And so that's eventually what happened. Not only did David take Saul's place, but David married Saul's daughter. David took over and ruled and did greater and mightier things than Saul ever could have dreamed of doing for the people of Israel. And David was blessed because he constantly listened to God. He loved God. He wanted to honor God in all that he did. And so when we look at Saul, his downfall was disobedience in pride. And if we take this outside the Bible and talk about just you and I today, how many times have we been willing to not do what we know God has called us to do? To love, to forgive people that maybe have wronged us. God has called us to forgive those who have hurt us. Yet I know a lot of us who make excuses why we shouldn't forgive those who have wronged us. Well, you don't know what they really did, or they never apologized, and we constantly make excuses for why we don't want to follow through with what God has called us to do. And even so, even if that's not you today, sometimes what we do, and I do this, is we'll do half of what God commanded us. Okay, I know I'm supposed to love my enemies. I know I'm supposed to forgive. I know I'm supposed to pray. I know I'm supposed to do these things. So you know what? I'll just say, hey, I forgive you. It's fine. But in my heart, I'll still hate them. I'll still hate them. Every time I look at them, I'll just get angry. Every time they ask to hang out, I'll ghost them. Whatever the case may be, right? We say, we're doing half of what God has called us to do. And I think that's true for you and me. I think we fall into that trap more so than the other one. We say, oh, we'll follow God's commandments, but we only do so halfway. God doesn't want halfway obedience from you and I. He wants full obedience. He wants us to go all in. He wants us to love people, to forgive. He wants us to submit ourselves to His guidance and to listen to where He wants us to go and lean into Him. Saul's downfall was disobedience to pride, and David's uprising came from humility, service, and love for God and His Word. And so hopefully we can learn from Saul's example of what it means to not abuse our power, our authority, but also to learn what it means to reject the pride and the way of doing it our way, and instead lean into God's ways and what He has for us. Next, family, next week I'm going to be announcing what we're going to do for the month of August and the month of September for next. So tune into our Instagram, tune into our Facebook, and hopefully we'll be able to see each other soon. I love you. I can't wait to see you next week.